So hey everybody, you just heard a part of the '60s theme song of Batman, the one with Adam West. And the reasoning why is because the Adam West Batman actually appeared before these other two versions of Batman I'm going to talk about today. Um, Adam West was Batman before Michael Keaton was in the Tim Burton versions, and he was also Batman before Christian Bale took on the role in the Nolan versions. Um, so for this video, guys, actually what it's all about is I want to compare the Tim Burton Batman movies with the Chris Nolan Batman movies. And the reason why is both Tim Burton and Christopher Nolan have taken on three Batman films over the course of their time as a film director. With Tim Burton, he directed two of the films and produced Batman Forever. That was his third credit as in a Batman movie. And then for Chris Nolan, obviously, he directed Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises. So because these two big icons in Hollywood have taken on Batman three times throughout the course of their careers, I thought it'd be appropriate to kind of compare and contrast what one of them did, what the other one didn't do, and what one of them did, and what the other one didn't do. So we're going to start with Tim Burton because he obviously took on Batman before Nolan did. So let's get started. So I guess as far as positives go, you guys, I kind of liked Tim Burton's gothic look to Batman. At the time, it felt appropriate. It felt like a very fitting thing to do for a Batman story, especially for that time period. So a lot of people liked that. I enjoyed it for the time. Thumbs up for Burton for doing that. Tim Burton also, I thought, managed to have more of a comic book feeling to his movies, and this is both a good and a bad thing. I mean, you're going to have some people who are like me and say, you know, the Nolan films are better because they felt more realistic and they felt even more appropriately dark for these kind of stories. But some are going to tell you, you know, Tim Burton's did feel a little bit more comic book-like. I mean, they felt like something that it felt like something you would pick up at a comic book store turned into a movie. I mean, it felt like you were flipping through the pages of this comic book and you were experiencing this movie. So I think that's one thing that Tim Burton and, yeah, I'd say me and some other Batman fans are going to probably tell you that it felt more comic book-like. I also thought Tim Burton had a more distinct style and look to his Batman movies. He, whenever you're watching his films, like every scene feels like it fits together. It feels like, you know, you're watching this. Almost feels like you're watching it, like you went to like a dollhouse store, and you know, like there's a whole Gotham City set, and the whole film felt like it fit in that dollhouse set, and in this case, it was Gotham City. So like, you know, all the characters seemed like they belonged together. All the sets did, all the cars and the people and the city property, all that stuff felt like it belonged with each other. So another huge thumbs up for Tim Burton for doing that. I also liked how Bruce Wayne had some more personal grudges towards the villains. You know, in the original Tim Burton Batman film, it was the Joker was actually Batman's parents' killer. So, you know, that alone is the reason why Batman went after Joker, because Joker was responsible for that. Um, the fact that Penguin wanted to be, you know, like the new mayor of the city, and you know he was doing a horrible job with it, and you know that bothered Bruce Wayne, and he wanted to do something about it. Um, with Catwoman, you know, he was always encountering her. Um, she was kind of the reason why he wasn't being able to fight as much crime as he once did, because she's always bothering him and always getting in the way. Um, and in the case of the Joel Schumacher film Batman Forever, which Burton produced, I would say that Batman's personal grudge against Riddler was the fact that he turned down his technology, and that, you know, Riddler hates him now for that. And with Two-Face, you know, I guess from what I remember from Batman Forever, he did something in a courtroom that like fried half of his face. So that's one reason why Two-Face is always after Batman, because of his face condition. Um, so, you know, Bruce Wayne always had a personal grudge with each villain. I think that's one thing that Burton managed to do that maybe even Nolan at times forgot to do at certain points. Um, I guess with Tim Burton, I thought it was kind of weird how he had origins for some major characters and he forgot to do one for some other ones. Um, Bruce Wayne's origin was explained, but it was kind of, I thought it was both clever and weird in how he explained it. Like, if you saw the original Batman, he you're watching this couple come out of the movie theater. They're going into a street alley, and you think the bum's going to about to kill him and everything. And then Batman appears, and then the criminal goes away and all that. Actually, no. He watches the criminal thing happen, and he's taking care of a different crime while that's happening. But either way, it's not actually Bruce Wayne's past. You think you're watching something that's similar to his past, though. So I guess, it was kind of one of those things where Burton said, oh, I want to do an origin for him, not so much for him, yes for him, no for him. So it's kind of weird how he did all that. I guess overall the biggest flaw of the Burton films is they just didn't seem believable. I mean, it was cool that he managed to have the whole comic book look, but it just didn't feel as believable as the Nolan films did. So now, speaking of Christopher Nolan, we're going to move on to Christopher Nolan's view and style on the Batman franchise. So first off, guys, Nolan's interpretation of Batman was much darker. I mean, you felt like you were watching a real existing city instead of a comic book city, and it was just loaded with crime. It just needed to be cleaned out. The police weren't doing anything. There's just too many criminals, too many dangerous criminals. Joker knew how to get into people's minds. Scarecrow knew how to get into people's minds with his drug plan. Ra's al Ghul knew, about all the dark criminals of the city. He wanted to train Bruce Wayne to assassinate all of them and all that. And I don't want to get into detail with Dark Knight Rises because that's still pretty new, but, Bane and, I guess in some ways even Catwoman were both threats to the city and all that stuff. So a much darker approach to Batman. And also a more realistic approach to Batman. I mean, it was explained why Bruce Wayne it's why he had all his martial art abilities, how he could hide in the shadows and people wouldn't notice him. He was a rich man. He could afford all these weapons and all these gadgets and the Bat Tumbler and the Bat Pod and the Bat Wing, which is just called the Bat. So it was just a more realistic scenario of how Batman would play out. The fact that Joker's just a crime lord and he knows how to get into people's minds. And just, it was just a crime-infested city, and he had to take care of it. Also, a lot of people liked the political undertones of the Nolan films. A lot of references to 9/11, a lot of references to the Wall Street crash. Some people think that there's a debate going on for The Dark Knight where they say, that Batman represents George Bush and that Heath Ledger's Joker represents Osama bin Laden or something like that, or Saddam Hussein. And I guess the government phone controversy was referenced in The Dark Knight too. So, just a lot of political undertones that happened in the Nolan films. Much more realistic villains. I mean, even though we don't get to see as many origins like we did in the Tim Burton films, the whole Joker thing was more mysterious. The whole, from what I saw from Dark Knight Rises, in the movie, Bane was a more realistic type of villain. And even Scarecrow, Nolan managed to find a way so we could see that scary Scarecrow that we saw in the comics, and we're able to do that by, making people hallucinate with these drugs, and that way we can make the Scarecrow that people remember from the comics. So just a more realistic take on the villains. Not really a positive or a negative, just something I noticed about the Nolan films. He has a lot of blue and silver values. Kind of like what you see on my shirt here, because I have the Heath Ledger Joker shirt on here. Just a lot of blue and silvers, like of the buildings, all the silver, all the blue. Even the Dark Knight logo down here, all blue. So just a lot of blues and silvers with his movies. You also notice that in the trailers, whenever you see lettering like the legend ends, July 20th and all that. It's all silver and blue. I guess one flaw of the Nolan Batman films, but that's because he's aiming for the more realistic take on him and wants to, have more realistic weapons. He has not as many weapons as we remember him having in the comics. In the comics he had a bat version of everything. But in the Nolan films he has bat weapons of realistic things. So I actually like the whole realistic route with that. But some could complain that in the comics, he had a lot more weapons. So how come Nolan didn't have as many weapons for Batman to use? But you know what? It's up for debate. I also thought one problem with Nolan's films, though, is he had a lot of unnecessary characters. it was nice that we had the Falcones, and it was nice that we had, maybe a sidekick to Catwoman in Dark Knight Rises. And, like all these characters and all these scenes. But you know what? A lot of them really didn't get a lot of screen time, or they really weren't given anything to do. Um, I would say mostly the A and B characters had something to do, thus the success of the films. But a lot of the C characters really weren't given a lot of things to do, like maybe what you would see in a Burton film. Um, so overall, guys, I would have to say Nolan did a much better job because I've seen all three of his films now. I've saw all the three Burton films now. Like I said, though, Burton's third film was just producing Batman Forever. He didn't direct it. Um, so yeah, I got it hands down. It's Nolan. I mean, he did the better job. Dark Knight alone was trampled over all the Burton stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I hope you agree with me with saying that, Nolan did a better job. But hey, if you disagree with me, leave a comment below saying why you like Burton better, maybe. And hopefully if DC does reboot it like they say they're going to, hopefully The Batman will be a good film as well. And hopefully we'll get a good director for that. So I will see you guys next time.